Exactly, just by welcoming a coach. Did you see how they showed up for the coach at the airport? The launch of the kids, like when there's some excitement with the Kaizer Chiefs fans, you realize when they sold back to back in different provinces.
That's tomfoolery. Now we go to cups. We don't go to kit launches. We go to cup finals.
Just found out how the journey to AFCON number 2 is going to start for Bafana fan, but we'll get to that. Welcome to yet another episode of To A Front right here on our YouTube channel. If this is your first time listening, you want to subscribe even before you hear anything, because I promise it's going to be good. But if you want to wait until the end, watch the whole thing and then subscribe at that point. My name is Jay, and as always, I'm with Chuck. What up?
I'm all good. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Pirates got their star first, then Bafana got their AFCON star. So if it's a road to number 2, you know the order of things. So Pirates went to Champions League and then Bafana to win AFCON at the end of the year. That's just how we do things. It was established here with the Springboks with every 12 years until we became better than that. That's how we do things.
I don't know about all of that, but we will talk about Pirates to begin with. Pirates, of course, Nedbank Cup weekend came through with a 3-1 victory against the Richards Bay, where we saw Tito Ambulance as a Timbisa Maswanganyi score a brace, Chuck. But we also saw from Tito some skills in the middle of the park, and he got the ball stripped off him, and Richards Bay almost scored a second goal in that one. And I want to ask this question about Tito, right? Should Tito change the way he plays in order for Pirates to be successful?
I'm not the biggest fan of that gusty flavor that we see EP155, that we see in the very bottom leagues where they're playing and they're just having fun. They're rolling on the ball and it's not going anywhere. But the exception is Tito, because along with that, it's separate instances, right, where he's playing forward passes, where he's scoring goals, because he did score a brace on the weekend. And then on the sideline, as a side act, Uzodeka in the middle of the park, when you're like, okay, what's happening now, if you don't quite understand. But I think when you look at the culture of Pirates here, we've always had like a showman. We've always had a Mark Mayambela or a Ketawake Masugu, a Steve Lekule. Someone's going to stand on the ball and just entertain the crowd for the sake of entertainment, apart from the goals, apart from the passes, just to say that, okay, let's go. And I think Tito brings that cognizant of the fact that he draws opponents to him by doing that. Obviously, he mishandled that ball and it was stripped off of him, and then it was almost a goal in the other end. But I think, Jay, it's not that he doesn't then just dribble and that's all he brings to the party. Case in point, he scored those 2 goals. He put us in a winning position. Then he does what he does. And even though he doesn't dribble all the time when we are comfortably ahead, sometimes he dribbles when the game is deadlocked at 0-0 early in the first half. But I think he gets the crowd involved. I think he lets the opponent know that I am better than you, number one. Number two, I think then he puts his foot on the ball to slow things down sometimes a bit, because sometimes Pirates tend to lose control of the game because we do play a fast-flowing form of football. We pass quickly, we run quickly, and sometimes it tends to be chaotic when we're not in control. And so when he slows things down, that's what you tend to see. So with the fact that, Jay, those 2 things come hand in hand, the passes, the goals, along with the dribbling or the showboating, if you want to put it that way, I don't think you take out the player, because that's who the player is. And when you think about who Tito is, Jay, he's someone who takes the onus, the responsibility to create chances for Pirates. And so when you take out Tito, you lose the showboating shot, but you lose a couple of goal-scoring chances. You lose a couple of rhythmic play or moments in the game where Pirates can benefit from having him on the park. So he's going to give you goals, he's going to give you assists. If he's going to dictate play, I was showboating.
Angazi ngimbona Dlisa doing the things that he does, whether he is standing on the ball in the middle of the park and it's getting the great elephant to be mad at him, or he is taking... It's the first time I actually saw it end up in a chance for the other team where it was stripped off of him. And even where he does it, I feel like he's calculating these things, because the opponent wasn't standing right in front of him. He lost control of the ball. And you can rightly say that he's losing control of the ball because we had Teka in the middle of the park, and that invited the opponent to strip the ball off of him, and they went to the other end on the edge of the box and almost got a goal. But I've not seen that before. I mean, if this is something that starts happening on a regular basis, where Orlando Pirates have conceded because he does that and he keeps doing these things and he doesn't learn, then that's a different conversation. But we're not there yet, and maybe you don't want to get there. But again, like, this is an anomaly, right? And you might ask the question, what's the purpose for it? You know, what is the point? And this is the conversation around Ushugela. Like, what's the point? Because even those guys that you mentioned, I didn't quite see the point. I love it. Like, I love Ushugela. Like, I used to love watching Kaizer Chiefs, like, when I was younger. Like, when Doctor and Utabo and Ujabu played for Kaizer Chiefs, I knew for a fact, as soon as Kaizer Chiefs are 2-0 up late in the second half or 3-0 up late in the second half, we're about to see entertainment. And I loved that. I loved being able to tune in and see that. I loved being able to watch Steve Lukulea, who was like my idol growing up. You know, Steve is going to get on you. And then later at a point, like Oscar, like Black Jesus, like I love Oscar. Like, to this day, Oscar is one of my favorite players. And if you ask me, like, an all-time great PSL 11, I wouldn't have Oscar in there, right? But if you ask me, hard-earned money, who do you want to pay and go watch? I want to go watch Scar because it's entertaining, you know? So, and I can hold those two things, like, on a scale in terms of what is required to win and what is the other side of football, which is entertainment, you know? And in a team that is going for a Premier Soccer League title and a second CAF Champions League title, you want to ask the question, is there a place for that? And with this Pirates team, I would say definitely there is, because in a different form at the highest end, which is what I said about Urele in a previous episode of ours, Urele is Ushugela in motion. You know, he does a show me your number and then he scores a screamer. That is the perfect combination of what South African football is, right? And then you have Tito. Tito is from Tembisa, as I am. Obuya Epukwini, his game is molded from there. And he has adapted it to a point where what you also see in the match against the Richards Bay, he's hitting a pass with the outside of his foot from his own half, and he's finding Onkota on the right wing. And he then is the person who follows up that play all the way to the edge of the box, receiving the pass from Orele, and what great chemistry from those Pirates boys, and he's finishing, right? And I think that part of him, that genius level play, that elite midfield play that we saw in that sequence, is fueled by the fact that he's also then the person who is going to be standing on the ball, who's going to be doing things where you're like, well, maybe this is not in this moment moving the team forward, but I believe in the greater sense it is, because when he does that, he does win back the crowd over. And I'm going to preach this until May, until it's champagne season, that Orlando Pirates faithful, the Orlando Pirates crowd, especially Escotin, is different from anything else that is in the PSL right now. And I'd venture to say, having seen them now on the continent, it might actually also be different from anything on the continent. Other countries, they've got lasers in our eyes. And I think Escotini, you've got the noise, you've got the drum, you've got the Tito. And it's integral to what Coach Jose Rivero is trying to do with this team, because the coaching is where it needs to be, the talent is where it needs to be, and the other branch, which is maybe the most important, and we've seen this more often in Europe maybe than we have seen right here at home, is the home crowd. That home crowd advantage, the momentum that Pirates get from being pushed on by the crowd is very, very important in terms of why Pirates are as successful as they are so far this season, and I think are destined for greater things. And one of the key components to getting the crowd involved is with Tito doing his things. So go right ahead. I call the ambulance.
Look, I think it's one of those things where you're sort of being an apologist for the kind of football he plays, because, well, myself specifically, because sometimes the showboating where I'm like, this is not even football, it's still but you sleep with your time. You're like, what part of football is that? Then when I say
them in a professional game, like, why?
Yeah, those things, I think too far left field in terms of is still the same game that we're watching, right? And as you said, with it, Umfukeng is the perfect combination of that, whereas he's dribbling in motion and he's going forward, he's progressing. And then this end product, there's a pass, there's a goal. So with Tito, those things are a bit separate, but what I would say in his defense is that he knows what time it is. Like when he came on late against Imakes in a game that we were supposed to win, but we didn't because we were 3-0 down by the time they come on. He's the chief architect in getting us those 2 goals back and almost equalizing in that game. He doesn't do sugar at that point because he knows what time it is. In a Bafana jersey, he doesn't do any of that because he knows what time it is. So he's someone who is aware and he knows what he's doing when he's doing it. And so you kind of do understand what it is. And I mean, when you think about how we came into the scene and how the chant Tito came about from last season when he was at the peak of his powers, from the MTN8 Cup all the way into the early rounds of the league, where Al Kibeli ball and the crowd gets behind that. So I think it's part and parcel of the game. It's what the fans come in to pay and see, but then also his end product, which is the 3 points, which is the cups as well. So I think for as long as he's performing as good as he is, why be mad?
Yeah, also, I do think Orlando Pirates absolutely need Patrick Tito Maswanganyi to be successful this season. Like those great big goals of the league in the Champions League, I don't think you can just simply replace with Tito. I don't think you can just plug someone else in there. And Pirates have created depth, right, in most positions. But Tito is unique. He is a spark in the team that is required. So long may you continue while it leads to success. You give me a praise and you give me that, like I'll take that. Like if you tell me that what we're gonna get from Tito is he's gonna stand on the ball or Zoteka and then he's gonna give me a praise, sure. Like give me that all day, every day, right? Chuck, the neighbors of Orlando Pirates, the derby, of course, coming up quick, fast, and in a hurry this weekend. They also won 4-0 in the cup, and they were nervous because there's no team in the PSL era who've been beaten as many times as Kaizer Chiefs by lower division opposition in the South African FA Cup, which is kind of ironic when you consider the fact that they're also the record champions of this particular tournament. So they strike a balance, right? And in their ongoing quest to win a first title, first trophy, silverware in 10 years, they've gone and made more signings. They've added Tashreeq Morris. They've added Maccabi Lilepo, as well as Utabo Celo, who's come all the way from Russia. What do you make of the reinforcements by Kaizer Chiefs? Are they going to help move this team forward?
Moving from Pirates to Chiefs, I need to make this clear and set this straight with you, Jay, specifically.
You're going to lie.
The biggest institute in South African football
to say something
is
that cannot be backed up by facts. And I'm not even a Kaizer Chiefs fan, but you know what, Chuck? I respect the rivalry. What you're saying is not facts. Kaizer Chiefs are very firmly the biggest institution in South African football.
57 fans.
How has this come back to Sundowns? How has this come back to Sundowns? I'm taking up for Kaizer Chiefs and you just throw it at Sundowns. I'm not even making an argument that Sundowns are like the biggest institution. I don't make that. I just say Sundowns are just the most successful one.
That's why I get to my
But in terms of the biggest institution, there's nothing like it, course.
With the biggest institute, that's why you're able to say the crowd in Orlando is like no other. The atmosphere in Orlando,
because
Africa,
the other team have done
is like
nothing
no other.
for 10
Number
years.
one. Number two, when you look at the success. Number three, our videos do well when we do Pirate stuff because it's the biggest institution in South Africa.
Because there is a depression with Kaizer Chiefs because of where they found themselves. If Kaizer Chiefs were doing what Pirates were doing, oh my goodness. My goodness. That's all I'm going to say. Exactly. Just by welcoming a coach. Did you see how they showed up for the coach at the airport? The launch of the kids. Like when there's some excitement with the Kaizer Chiefs fans. You realize when they sold back to back in different provinces.
That's tomfoolery. Now we go to cups. We don't go to kit launches. We go to cup finals.
And you put me in a position where I'm taking out for Kaizer Chiefs here. But those are facts, Chuck. Kaizer Chiefs are bigger than everybody else in this country.
It's not big shit going to kit launches. Now we go to cup finals. We're in Africa. That's big.
And that's
not
the point.
That's the point.
That's the point.
Games.
If they ever do get back to their glory days,
that's saying, like what, 20 years ago. Anyway, as they bid to solidify what Jay would claim to be the biggest institute in South Africa, they would need to win silverware. They need to win cups. They need to be competitive. And with the inclusion, or rather the signing of these three players, Jay, it's a mixed bag for me because Tashreeq Morris doesn't score a lot of goals. So you wonder to yourself, when you've had trouble with Ranga, you've had trouble with Ashley Dupre, you've had trouble with Usaile as well. Umtu was the one who's scoring your goals, young talent. Umtu scoring your goals, Shabala, young talent. And when you bring in Tashreeq Morris, are you sorting out the problem? Are you making the forward line better? I don't think you necessarily are. So I don't know about that particular signing. Maybe the coach has seen something that I haven't, and I'm happy to watch and see because he's the coach, I'm the analyst. But number two, Jay, Lilepo, I think because Nabi has had an eye on him since he was coaching back in Yanga, you think to yourself, there's something there because he still wants that player. And in addressing the idea that Chiefs, it's a project, it'll take time, I need players. If he's still reaching out to that player, that means that player, according to Nabi, still got it. Another person in the forward line has decent number of goals, has got international experience, although it be in the third tier of French football, but he sees him good enough to play for Kaizer Chiefs. The thing, though, as hyped up as it could be and as good as it could be in that particular league for the particular team, we tend to see that when players come to Kaizer Chiefs, somehow, some way, they don't shine as well or they don't glow as brightly as they do in their previous teams, and then the pressure gets a hold of them. So I don't know about that one. I haven't quite seen him in the flesh in terms of how he plays and what he brings to the table. I've seen highlights, which, like I said, is not necessarily the full package because the pressure comes in when you come to Chiefs. Because we've seen players sign Double de Klerk, Boom Simang, all these other players who've come to Chiefs, and all of a sudden you're like, what happened? You know? So Thabo Cele, I think, might be the star signing because what you want to build in every successful team is a spine. I don't know if they've gotten it right with the keeper. That part of the spine is a bit shaky. But if Thabo Cele would align maybe with Martin, then you find someone who will be a striker, then you're close to solving your issues. But if you don't have a proper spine, then you might have problems. And I think he's key because Nabi has always wanted to play out from the back. And if he can be the guy who can receive the ball and allow the team to play out from the back, then that's one big box ticked in terms of here's how I want to start my build-ups. So if Thabo Cele can be that person who can be, number one, responsible with the ball, number two, recycle it well and choose the best passing options, because I think they're missing a big player in Castillo. I think he was a good player in terms of defining what the spine of Kaizer Chiefs is, making those late runs into the box, being solid in the midfield, and just being reliable performer week in, week out. So if Thabo Cele can bring anything near that in terms of controlling the midfield, along with Abo Blom, along with Abo Ngo, and form some form of cohesion in the midfield, then Chiefs are dangerous because they create chances. They just can't put them away, which then questions come upon Lilepo. Will he aid that? Morris, will he aid that? But Thabo Cele, can he keep them competitive? Because the thing that they turned around the last two fixtures against free agents and Squins that they haven't conceded, which is great. But for the entire campaign of the league, they've been conceding goals all the time, and that's because of the weak midfield. And obviously the shaky defense because there aren't established partnerships that continue playing every other game. So for me, Jay, the jury's out. Who knows what would happen with these players? But if I'm going to be optimistic about someone, maybe Thabo Cele.
Yeah, it's hard to be optimistic, Chuck. And the reason it's hard to be optimistic is because of recent history where Kaizer Chiefs and signings are concerned. Since the start of the 23-24 season, Kaizer Chiefs have added 19 players. This is not counting the return of a Blom or the matriculation of the development players into the first team. If you go back another season, that number balloons to about 35, right? And I'd ask you this question. I'll ask everybody watching, especially Kaizer Chiefs fans, of the players. And as I'm saying, I'm talking about a group now of 35 players or so who have been signed. Who stands out in your mind as, oh man, that has been not even a great, Chuck, but a good Kaizer Chiefs signing? That is someone who has been a solid performer in the black and gold. You can't really think of anyone. You can't think of anyone who has joined in the last 3 seasons that's the guy you need to build around, right? And even this season, as they've made signings, of course, the ones who were signed at the start of the season, they still need some time to fully suss them out in terms of how good they are, right? But with Miguel Inacio, for example, he's not a centre-back. He is a converted centre-back. He probably should be playing in the midfield as a destroyer, and we've seen him get yellow cards and red cards. But the jury is still out. Even with Dortley, as great as the potential is with Dortley, and we've seen him for Bafana, we've also seen him be part of a shaky defense. And most Kaizer Chiefs fans I speak to are ready to give up on Ukros already. The coach seems to have given up on Untuari, the goalkeeper. And I personally felt coming into the season, you should just go with Vuma. Because yes, he might not be Tumlenkune or Brian Spider-Baloy, but he's solid enough where if you have other gaps to plug, you don't need to go and buy the keeper as well. So when I do note the recent history of Kaizer Chiefs and their signings, the most exciting prospects at Kaizer Chiefs in the last few seasons have been those players who have come up from development. In terms of when they've taken out the checkbook and went and signed a player, however impressive as you say they were in their previous team, when they get to Kaizer Chiefs, it seems like it's a different player altogether or a different experience. So I'm not very optimistic. I see the profiles of the players. I hear the excitement. I hear the scouting reports. But because of where they have landed and also with a couple of them one, an unknown with Ulilepa, and two with Umores, where we've not seen anything over a 10-year stretch. A sample piece that long to suggest that, oh, this guy's gonna come in here and bang in the goals, you know. And we know Kaizer Chiefs do need a striker because they create chances in high volume, and you think to yourself, if they can just get somebody who is prolific in front of goal, then they are going to continue being one of the better goal scorers. The issue has been on defense, and I think Utawakel, as much as he's not a quote-unquote destroyer, he helps in that because he is a controller in the middle of the park. And that is a player who Samkelo Zwane is, but he's more mature, he's more developed than Uzwane. And you think if Kaizer Chiefs can get more control in games, he can dictate the tempo of games more often, then you're not going to see Kaizer Chiefs concede as many goals because they would be dictating what is happening in games more often. But again, even there, I know who Tawaklele is. I know about him. I've not seen him play much. I know Kaizer Chiefs have coveted him for a long time, and there's great big excitement from football fundis where he is concerned and being plugged into this Kaizer Chiefs team. But again, this is what we thought of Umart when he was at Iskukun, you know, and he's come in there and he's quite honestly not lived up to those expectations. Same thing with the Ox. The Kaizer Chiefs fan base were crying out specifically, go get Ox at Stellies, and he's been there, and it's not been a perfect transition for him to come into the team. He seems to be finding his feet now again. So the optimism is not very high. I know why they signed Utawaklele. I know also why they signed Ulilepo. It seems Coach Nabi likes that kind of profile in terms of a forward who is big, who's athletic. That's why he's played Uranga. That's why he's played Usaile even just before Saile made his move now to Supersport to take another look at him. And with Umores, who was clubless just a few months ago before Supersport picked him up, I can't imagine they've signed him for his goal-scoring ability because, again, you look at his track record, it doesn't scream that this is a man who's going to come in and replicate Collins Mesuma numbers or even Knowledge Musona numbers, you know. But perhaps what he can do with his height, his physicality, and his engine, which his previous coach Roger Desau speaks highly of, that he's gonna help you defending from the front, which is crazy in modern football. We talk about strikers in terms of their defensive abilities, but also what he may come into the team to do is help with the link up play and holding up the ball and bringing those other players into goal scoring opportunities. Duba and Umtu are the leading goal scorers for Kaizer Chiefs this season. So if not, maybe looking to him to go give you double-digit goals, that's what you are looking for him to do. Because in a team, right, the number 9, I still love my number 9s to be primarily goal scorers, but you don't have to have a number 9 who is the chief goal scorer if you have goals coming in from everywhere else. We saw this most famously with Bobby Firmino at Liverpool, because Mane and Salah are giving you goals. So he doesn't have to be the guy who is putting the ball in the back of the net primarily. He just needs to get those other guys involved and they'll score the goal. So if that happens, then you're happy with that, right? So we'll see how it goes. As I'm saying, my optimism is not very high because, yeah, history, and this is just me going off of recent history, has shown that Chiefs sign players, but they don't quite work out.
I mean, there's a Lisibanku who might be available from Sundowns. They go that way to solve their problems, or is it the same of what we're talking about in terms of just doesn't work out? There's Lodge rumored as well to be joining Chiefs, or there are links there. If he goes to Chiefs, does that work out? We don't know, but at least Bobby Mtaung Jr. is trying something. Kaizer, sorry. Family business. One of those
Mtaung boys.
Kaizer Mtaung Jr. Thank you, Jay. So I hopefully they can make a run. But Jay, looking at the country as a whole, no longer divided into Chiefs, Pirates, or Sundowns, Bafana were drawn in Group B alongside Egypt, Angola, and Zimbabwe. Quickly, Jay, initial impressions. Do we get out of that group, and how tough is it in terms of the pot 1 oppositions that we could have drawn?
Hey, I told you to mark your calendars. The 18th of January 2026, Bafana are going to be lifting an AFCON title. So, Chuck, I think that's self-explanatory. Do I think we get out of the group if we're going to go and win the whole thing? Yes, we do get out of the group, but it's a tough group, right? Because in terms of Angola and Egypt, they had the exact same records. Six games played, 4 wins and 2 draws, no losses in the qualification stages. And you look at Egypt and you always think about Egypt, right, as the record champions in the AFCON, and you think Mo Salah, you think Mamouche now at Manchester City, and they're going to be one of the favorites of this tournament. But I'm happy to have an Egypt in our group, because I think it focuses you from the get-go, right? You're coming up against Egypt. You know what it is. You know what you're going to get or what you anticipate. And there's no easing ourselves into the tournament from the get-go, as I'm saying, with the mindset that we are there to win the tournament. Go ahead and test yourself against one of the stronger teams, one of the teams that are expected to go deep in this tournament. And where Angola and Zimbabwe are concerned, our SADC neighbors, or COSAFA, because this is football, our COSAFA neighbors, I'm not too concerned. I know Angola were brilliant before getting knocked out in the quarterfinals in the previous AFCON, which prompted even Orlando Pirates to go sign one of their players, which hasn't quite worked out because he's gone back home now. So I with no disrespect to any of the teams, right? I genuinely believe, and I am a homer. I say that with no fear, but with favor, that I'm a homer. I'm rooting for Bafana, of course, and maybe my expectations are fueled by the fact that I'm from South Africa, but also when I take a step back away from the fact that I support Bafana, I've seen this team and their growth under Coach Hugo Pros. I saw them in the AFCON, where we had a good opportunity to win it last year, January, and I think the team has only continued to grow. And so I do anticipate that Bafana are going to be there as one of the protagonists in terms of going all the way to win the tournament. So, and I'm happy with the group because, as I'm saying, from the get-go, it gets us to focus in on the task at hand. And then my last comment on Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe are in our World Cup qualification group, so we're going to have an opportunity to take a look at them up close. And gauging how those games go, we'll be very prepared to play against them as well when it comes to AFCON. So I'm happy with the draw, and I think it's gonna bode well for Bafana, because if it doesn't, we're gonna go home. But also that's gonna be hard to do because 12 teams come out of the group automatically, and 4 best placed third place teams. If we are not one of those 16 teams available,
I think, as you put it here, with the 12 best and then the 4 best third place teams in each group, Hugo Pro will make those statements once again. If I don't make it out the group, then I'm going to leave, because it shouldn't be that difficult, right? But I think it also coincides, Jay, and I think obviously May will come through and we'll see what happens in terms of the fate of Pirates, Stellies and Sundowns in their CAF competitions. But it coincides with those sides doing well in Africa, and it's always been with just Sundowns, and we saw what just Sundowns did in AFCON was very, very good. But now that we're now testing our depth, because players like Mshishi have gone down, Percy Tau has gone down as well, and we have to look elsewhere. It's good to know that players from Stellies, I mean, Reinas, we're crying out for him now, is part of Sundowns and he's hit the ground running. There's Talent Mbats who's integrated. There's Maswanganyi who's from Pirates as well. That we're seeing the exploits of what Bafana did earlier on early last year in the AFCON, being replicated by the size that these teams play for in Africa in terms of their club competition. So one, that's a good sign. Number two, Jay, I think Angola is a banana skin in terms of it might be a tricky fixture, but I trust the boys to play well enough, because I saw in terms of there's easy opposition in terms of like South Sudan and Uganda, where it could be a bit tricky, but we know how to self-correct and then get switched on for the big games. Egypt needs no motivation. I think it's a good test, like we did with Tunisia early on in the previous campaign, where you know what the pace of the tournament is or what the big boys are bringing, and we handle them quite well in terms of playing our game, playing our style, from group phases all the way to knockouts. So I believe in this Bafana team. It's just a pity it's so long. I mean, it's going to be so far in terms of the back end of the year. I want it to be now in June or something like that, so we can see the boys play, because I'm that anxious to watch Bafana play. But I think, Jay, we should, I won't say smooth sailing, but we'll handle business. And then at the knockout stages, that's when it actually starts for us, because 16 teams out of those groups, you should qualify. 2
fun facts. Fun fact number 1, Bafana play an AFCON game on my actual birthday, playing Angola. So we're going to win. Second fun fact, when we play Egypt, it is on the 26th of December. And do you know would have happened on the 25th of December? Mo Salah would have dropped the Christmas picture. So there's nothing to worry about. Nothing whatsoever to concern ourselves with as where anything at the AFCON initial stages is concerned. Asibasabi, Siabafuna, they must bring it on. And as I say, I do anticipate that we are going to do great in that one. a team, Chuck, that is maybe on the precipice of doing great again. We've seen them start slow and finish well to go on to win Premier League title. Manchester City came through as 3-1 winners against Chelsea, and I'll talk about Chelsea, but I want to ask you about Manchester City. There's a feeling amongst Liverpool fans and Premier League fans that maybe the boogeyman is up to his old tricks. Manchester City are on a good run of form right now in the Premier League at least, but are 12 points behind Liverpool. Can they? Can they? Surely not, Chuck. Can they overcome a 12-point deficit to go win the Premier League title?
No. Because, look, one, there's still that PSG result that for me is they're saying to me, these guys can't do it because yet again, 2-goal lead dropped, 4 goals conceded. And when you look at Kusanov, who was a debutant because Pepe trying to fix his issues in defense, he has an error that leads to a Noni Madueke goal. So they still got issues there in terms of trying to rectify those things, right? But also, in all those other runs, I think where he's won 6 out of 7 titles, it's like been 4 Carabao Cups and a good run in the Champions League, where elsewhere they're looking good, just that in the league they're not quite the best. Where they are now in the Champions League, if things don't go well for them in the last game of the upcoming rounds, they are completely out. Never mind playing knockouts to then progress into the last 16, they are completely gone. So for the mere fact that it's going wrong everywhere else, I don't think that this particular team can put things together. One, I look at the fact that Rodri still can't be replaced in terms of the options because who came from Dortmund, went to Barca, came back again, Gundogan. He's showing his age. When you look at the player that they got from Chelsea as well, I'm forgetting these players' names. He was injured as well. And so their midfield is quite a bit of a mess. And they've got Matheus Nunes as well, who isn't quite the best deputy for those particular players. When you look at their defense, Vardiol scores goals, and he scored again against Chelsea. But the issues are at the back, my brother. That's where you need to fix things, not in front, because you score anyway, but you concede.
And in that endeavor, they've signed a 20-year-old who they threw into the Lions den, and they've signed an 18-year-old Brazilian to fix those issues at the back.
It doesn't quite seem adequate to me in terms of what you have at your disposal and what you're using them for. Because Vardiol shone at the World Cup for his defensive abilities, except for the one time when Messi had him. Apart from that, Jay, he wasn't signed to score goals every other week. And so he's doing that quite well. Like, kudos to him. But what about the defensive work as well? Because when he does get the goals, can you stop Barcola after that? Can you stop Vitinha after that? No, they can't. And that's an issue for me, Jay. I think it's easy to progress, like from position number 9 to the top 5, top 4. Maybe you can because those sides are a bit close together. But breaking through to then challenge Arsenal, to then go all the way to then try prize it from Liverpool, I think that's a tall order, Jay. I think that's a little too much even for City. So my answer is no.
Listen, you don't play PSG in Paris every other week in the Premier League, so that might be different. But also, the Premier League does have teams who play a form of what we saw PSG do in order to be successful against Manchester City. Bournemouth, when they played City at home, they gave City all sorts of problems, like pressing them aggressively in their own half. And you're going to come across teams that play like that. This is why I was disappointed with Chelsea, right? Because with the kind of players they have, with the game breakers that they have, I thought that and you go into that game, and even though you start maybe the match day ahead of Manchester City, City are still the favorites to win that game. So you've essentially got nothing to lose. Also, because we've heard from Maresca himself that this team is years away from challenging for a Premier League title, and Chelsea fans back that notion up, and maybe at least just for this season that they're not in the title chase. So why play nervous? Why play within yourself? Why not go out there and express yourselves? Why not give it to City? You know, in the same ways where you've it's on video now in terms of how you want to approach playing against Manchester City, and it started well. Chelsea started with the goal, and this is how they started though in their matches. And then they go back into a shell. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I have a suspicion of what it is. What I don't know is if it's a mentality thing or if it's an instruction that goes from the coach that, well, if you do take the lead, maybe you want to be more conservative, but it's not working. Especially at Manchester City, it did not work for them at all. And then you have them playing the high line and they're isolating Erling Haaland. Like, I could have told you as an Arsenal fan, just go back to the game last season at the previous season 2 seasons ago I think now at the Etihad when that man was unfurling his hair and doing his thing where City like kept playing it up to him and De Bruyne was making runs off of him. Like he is great holding up the play. You maybe not think of that very much, but again that guy is a physical specimen, and if you put him up against a centre back and it's a high line, he is going to control that ball and he's going to play it doesn't have to be perfect because there's a whole lot of space behind to play it into. He's going to play the ball behind, and Chelsea fell into that, and I couldn't quite understand that. But I also think Chelsea's problems come down to the fact that they are a young team. And what you expect from young teams, as you expect from young players, is inconsistency. You know, they're still learning their trade. They're not quite the finished product as yet. And this is still the first season under this new coach. And we've seen him from preseason make big choices. And also now at this point in the season, they had parted ways with Trevor Chalobah and they have decided to go get him back because they need the defensive reinforcements, which is another issue, right? Defensively, they're not at the races. One, they absolutely need to get another keeper. Robert Sanchez's agent needs to be on the phone with other teams because I will be shocked if that man is the keeper of Chelsea come the start of next season, because where the hell was he going? Where was he going? He doesn't have the answer to that to that question. Like it was just like Szczesny in the Champions League against Benfica. But with Szczesny, I can maybe at least excuse the fact that man was retired, you know, and he's come back from retirement and now suddenly he's playing against the most extreme of highlines at Barcelona. What's your excuse? Robert? I don't think he quite has one. And then with the defense in front of him, one, they don't have confidence from the keeper, but also the only member who's available and consistent is Cucurella. Colwill has been touted as the future in terms of Chelsea centre backs for a long time, but I don't think he's all that great, at least right now. You know, he's not John Terry, he's not Thiago Silva, he's not Ricardo Carvalho. I don't get that sense right now. And then when you look at his partners, Disasi, he's in and out. They've gone and got Trevor Chalobah, as I'm saying, and then you've got Reece James, who's a world class player when he's fit, but how often is he fit? And him coming in and out of that defensive line, I think defenses need stability in order to be successful, and you don't get that with Reece James being in and out because of his injury. How much cohesion, how much chemistry can you build up in that situation? So that's something they still also need to figure out. But they did well to get within 4 points of Liverpool at some point, but I think the toll of them being young and not quite being settled as the team that ultimately we're going to see when they are ready to challenge for the big trophies is what is hampering them.
Yeah, I think Chelsea can do better. It's just that they've had the same Achilles heel the entire season, conceding goals. And as you said, the team is young, and I think what's also come to bite them in the butt is the fact that they've rotated so much that you think to yourself, does Maresca actually trust Nkunku? Does he trust Joao Felix? Does he trust Neto? Because those guys hardly get a sniff.
How can he trust Nkunku, Chuck, when that man says Nkunku is not a striker, but then he keeps bringing him on for Jackson? So what is happening there? Like, so is he a striker? Is he not?
Well, his numbers suggest he's a striker. His career at Leipzig suggests that he's a striker. Jackson, because his goals have dried up completely, and they're relying solely on Cole Palmer because Sancho's fallen off a bit. No, he did pounce on a mistake, but he's not necessarily the greatest forward as well in terms of what they have as options. So there are a myriad of things that were working when it was working in that particular period of time. But because now they've hit a brick wall, you can't really pivot much in terms of how to fix it because Joao probably regrets. Side note, Joao Felix's career from what it could have been to what it is now. Moving in and out in Chelsea, not really being good for Barcelona, not really being wanted at Atletico as well. That's a mess in terms of the potential.
Yeah, Chuck, with Joao Felix, I just don't think he's the guy we thought he was. I mean, he had a bright start. Now he was signed for 126 million euros, and maybe because of the price tag, we anticipate this is the next great Portuguese talent. But he's had chances. He's had runs, and I saw some fans talking about the fact that maybe he doesn't put in the grind, right? Because like, how do I pick talent if talent doesn't want to work hard? That is true, but. Yeah, I don't know if it's done to that. Maybe it is a part of it. Maybe he doesn't grind as hard, but yeah, I just think he's a nice player.
I think to me that Sancho is grinding harder than Joao Felix, which means that Sancho can train well. Which means I don't know.
which means Eric Ten Hag was not being honest or something was happening there. I don't know, Chuck. And that's the thing, because if he's coming on the record and talking about the fact this is Joao Felix that is not playing, you think, but also he's advocating for himself that he is training well. He thinks he's training well, so why isn't he getting the chances? I think he's not really getting the chances everywhere he goes, and he keeps going everywhere because ultimately he keeps getting found out where he is, that that's not quite the guy we can build around.
We need guys to write books and give us the truth, because nobody last year, Ruben Amorim said that he'd rather play his goalkeeping coach instead of Rashford because Rashford does not give enough in training. So these players are doing funny things, Jay. But in terms of guys who are giving it their all, in terms of at least being there at the top and showing up, we cross over to the Australian Open rather. Yannick Sinner disposed of Alexander Sasha Zverev because he's just that much better, because he works that much hard on every point, and it's hard to topple a man who's on top of his game. And on the women's side, Jay, as well, there's Madison Keys, who defeated Arina Sabalenka. How do you see both of those finals going?
First of all, the men, right?
Yeah.
Those boys born in the 90s are disappointments. Disappointments. How are you boys? This stat is wild to me, right? So, in terms of men's tennis and Grand Slam titles won, the group born in the 80s, and we know that is a group that contains Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, and then there's also Wawrinka in there. There's also Marat Safin from the early 80s, and there's Leighton Hewitt and Andy Roddick in there. They have, and Andy Murray as well. They've got 80 Grand Slam titles, and what they did is unprecedented, especially that big three, where they went so deep into their careers, still at their peak, that, as I'm saying, it's unprecedented, and they ate into the next generation's peak, which somewhat has resulted in, but also, as I'm saying, as a group, those boys born in the 90s need to have a meeting and talk to themselves. Two Grand Slam title. Gentlemen, Dominic Thiem, after making a few Grand Slam titles, particularly at the French, finally won one at the US Open. And yes, he was then hampered by injuries, which has led to his retirement. But prior to the injuries taking control of the narrative of his career, he seemed as if he was all too happy to just win the one Grand Slam and like, I did it. I'm done. You know, you think of like Del Potro also has like great talent and has just the one Grand Slam title won against Federer at the 2009 US Open. He was hampered by injuries, right? And then it's just Medvedev. And then Medvedev last year at the Australian Open had a 2-love lead against Yannick Sinner. He gave it up and Sinner won it, of course. And then again, the great hope or the great defender of the 90s group and generation would be Zverev. And he was quite limp in that final. Like he's the world number 2, but he honestly does not feel and did not look as though he's at the level of Yannick Sinner. I think the only other person really who's at that level is Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic, if his body at this age will cooperate going forward, which it does not look like it will happen. Here's another stat I want to tell you, Chuck, right? Mm-hmm. In the top 10, Yannick Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz, and Novak Djokovic, who was born in 1987, are the only 3 players who are not born in the 90s. In the top 16, and I'll tell you why I choose this number, 11 of the top 16 were born in the 90s. I choose that number because if all things being equal and at a Grand Slam, the matches hold to the seeding, that means 11 out of the 16 players in the last 16 would have been born in the 90s. And with all those opportunities, these boys cannot go and win a Grand Slam title, cannot go and win just more than 2. We're talking about the fact that at we're about to come to the end of January. Right? That means the first batch of 90s babies on the men's side are about to be 35. How many more opportunities are you going to get to win Grand Slam titles? They're a forgettable bunch. I'm sorry to say it. They're a forgettable bunch because they really can't show up.
And Rafa and Roger.
You see the question that you are asking. You see the question that you are asking. Okay, fine. What could they have done against them? Fine, Chuck. Because at the back end, players born in 97, 98, 99, they're in the physical peak. As men, as athletes, 26, 27, 28, right? Okay, I'll give you what could they have done against the holy trinity of tennis. What about the kids? The kids who are now coming into the game, and I know it's just Alcaraz and Sinner at the moment to represent it, but they've got 7. They've got 7 Grand Slam titles, and guess what? They're only going to get better. So I'll give you, they could not have done anything against Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal. But these kids who are like
Jay.
still smelling like breast milk. They can't defend themselves even against them. Come on, Chuck.
If I were to make a case for them, I'd say at least in the ATP 250s, 500s, I'm sure the numbers measure up and they're doing something. And obviously, I know it's for Grand Slams, but I'm just saying.
Yes, it is for Grand Slams, which is why we've been talking about this because of the Australian Open final.
With opportunities given, they're winning their fair share. Just at the very, very top, Jay. They're just titans at the top.
Can I give you one more stat?
Damn the 90s kids again.
Zverev specifically. I'll give you one more stat about Zverev, right? Coming into that final, Zverev's record against the top 10, I believe, overall was as well 27 and 30, which is now 27 and 31 in Grand Slams. Do you know overall in his career? Do you know what it is at Grand Slams? It's 4 and 16. Do you know that he's only managed to win one out of 15 matches against a top 5 player at Grand Slams? He's managed to win almost 50% in regular tournament play. So and with tennis, it counts at the top, Chuck. You know this. You were there for Karen Wozniacki being world number 1 without a Grand Slam title. And there were questions, is it really legitimate? Because every time Serena came back onto the scene, she just took people's lunch money.
Consistency. That's what it is.
Consistency will lead you to number 1. And I'll give you that. And it's prestigious, right? And you'll win titles. Like Zverev has won the 5th most money in history on the tour. And by the time he's done, it's probably going to be like in the top 3. But who cares about all of that when we're talking about legacies? Like, go and win a Grand Slam, man. Like, take it to at least a 4th set. Take it to a 5th set. Do something.
When you look at the talent pool and the legacies of the people who are beating him, who have given him this poor record in Grand Slams, what really, realistically, could he have done against that? Does he have the tools?
By the talent pool, are you including Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner?
Yes, sir.
Do you know why you're asking me that question, Chuck?
Because
now we know how good these boys are because they've gone and won Grand Slams. Before they won Grand Slams, before they took the step up to being players who look like they're going to win double-digit Grand Slams, are going to be in that conversation with the absolute best in history. Before they became that, when they were still kids, you know the theory, like, if we can use the time ring to go back in time, why don't we just go, which was what, Machine Man?
No, not Iron Patriot. It's War Machine.
War Machine asked the question, why don't you just go back in the past and, baby Thanos in his manger? Before he gets to become the Titan and he does what he does. Before Alcaraz and Sinner became what we are seeing play out in front of our eyes, why couldn't you do it then?
Yeah, man. This sounds like Zverev is the man fields, which he's not, Jay. He's trying. He's getting to Grand Slam finals. Just that in the way are these Titans. What can he do? If it's not Zverev,
he's a very good player. I'm giving him that. It's a very good player. But it's disappointing with what we think he is. With the level of talent, and also he's spoken about amongst and on the men's tour as one of the fittest guys. So you think a best of 5 is something that will absolutely suit him, but he gets to these moments and he shrinks. Chuck, that's the truth. He shrinks.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, he shrinks. But Yannick Sinner played a very good final as well, and
that
I think
he did.
The key, and I don't know if this can be proven true, but I think. When I've seen the first set tussles between him and Shelton in the semis and him and Zverev in the final, that's more. That's the opening. That's when it's a bit evenly poised. Where if you get it to your side, maybe you get a bit of momentum going to the other sets. But because they keep on losing, and then Sinner gets up, and it's a tall order because he's well rounded. There aren't any obvious deficiencies in his game. He's athletic. He hits a very good power shot, in either flank with either shot, backhand or forehand. Not too much you can do. Like we said, these guys are special talents. If it's not Alcaraz, it's Sinner who are in your way. And when Novak's body is able, you saw what he did against Alcaraz as well. It's not much that you can do. And so if you're not there with your A game, and also he was serving quite well in the beginning parts of the tournament, the latter parts not so much so. And I think he needed his serve to be pinpoint to have a chance against Sinner. It didn't show up. So.
And Sinner was attacking that serve as well. And to be actually fair, if you look at the serving percentages, Zverev was getting his first serve in there, but it did not matter. And that's the thing where we find ourselves in 2025. The guy who was standing on the opposite end of the court is a guy who is only continuing to grow as an all-time great, who believes that this is the level he belongs at. He's the world number 1 and he wears that crown very well. and the game is only continuing to grow. You mentioned the fact that he's got weapons. He's got one of the like a set of one of the best weapons out on tour, and he also is able to defend with the best of them. Like what I saw when Zverev did try step it up and push the pace. Sinner was everywhere, man. He was looking like Djokovic out there, and it's crazy to think about because again, athletes continue to take like evolutions. Because Sinner is taller than Djokovic, but he looks just as limber. You know, he's getting to everything, whether it's like short on the court or it's like we asked to run east and west. Like he was getting to everything, and it was being returned with a little more spice on top. So it's a great player that Zverev faced, and it's a player who, as I'm saying, is purring right now.
When you talk about the evolution of the athlete, do you think he's shaken off the controversy of the positive tests and stuff? Do you think that people see him in that light and just, you're that good, there's no assistance?
No, because that is something that WADA are going into again, because he said he had little knowledge of it, right? And that is what they're asking, that, well, did he have no knowledge of it? I think this is something, well, because it's being reopened, it's something that's going to follow him. He himself, though, I think has got like great mentality. The difference between him and Swiatek, where Swiatek seemed to have been affected by her positive result, Sinner has moved on from it. And when I look at him on court, and he's very stoic. He doesn't seem to be bothered by much, and he's even keeled in his emotions. He looks like a straight up killer out there, you know. So I don't think distractions off the court are things that are in his mind when he's playing. Whereas you look like at his Zverev, there was a shot which went so badly for him, it felt like it's just not your day, which like hit the net cord, and it was at a pivotal moment in the match, and it went over on his side. And you see him looking up at his people and at the crowd, where it's like, I can't do anything. And I felt for him in the moment. But the guy on the other end, I feel like if that had happened to him, he would have shrugged it off and just like kept going. So yeah, I think Sinner is this is my belief, right? I think Carlos Alcaraz is better than Sinner, and I need him to play Sinner in Grand Slams more often and stop being knocked out earlier on in the tournament. But I think what is happening with Carlos Alcaraz, for example, being knocked out early in tournaments or not being as consistent, is something that won't happen to Sinner, because his mind is fully like on the game. And as I'm saying, he carries himself as the world number one and as the guy who's going to be out there with a target on his back, but he's going to respond each time. So no, Chuck, I don't think off-court distractions are things that are playing on his mind.
Last in the men's game, Sinner did say to Zverev that he's too good not to win a Grand Slam in the near future. Hopefully he reps for the 90 skills and does something. Then you can say, okay, after all that huffing and puffing, at least you got something to show for it. On the ladies' side, it seemed to me, at least, when we got to the final, Madison Keys against Sabalenka, I thought to myself, it's a foregone conclusion. Sabalenka's power is too good. She's going to win that game. But alas, I was mistaken. It goes to 3 sets, and I think for the first time in more than 10 years, the third set went beyond 5-5 in terms of games played. Almost went to the 10-pointer tiebreak. It didn't, because Madison Keys pulled it out the fire and converted. Jay, what do you make of her run all the way to the final and then capturing that crown?
You know, Chuck, when Madison Keys broke in that final game, which was the championship game, I was surprised. Like I thought, because of how I was going on serve, because there were so many breaks in the first 2 sets, that okay, it seems as if they've settled into the pattern where they are just going to continue holding serve. You know, that I was anticipating a championship tiebreak, and it didn't happen. And kudos to Madison Keys, because I was worried about Keys coming into the final, because after she beat Swiatek to make her first Grand Slam final since the 2017 US Open, where she lost to Sloane Stephens and hasn't been back to one, of course, since until now, which is almost 8 years into it. I thought the same thing that happened, for example, with the Proteas men, especially when they finally got over the hump of going past a World Cup semi-final. That was their final, you know. And I saw the interview with her friend afterwards, where like the emotions were very high. It was nervous excitement, but it was also like she was tearing up as well, thinking to myself, no, this is not the time to be feeling like this, because it's going to be hard to come off of this high and to get yourself going again for the final, right? But man, what she proved in that final was superb. That she has the mindset. She's always had the game. We've always known she's always had the game. She turned pro at 14, and after playing Serena Williams for the first time and giving Serena a good game, Serena came out and said that this is a player who's going to win multiple Grand Slam titles. And that's what we expected. Unfortunately, her career has been riddled with injury, but she was healthy for this run, and she was not doing what Zverev was doing. She was not holding back. She was playing, and she was playing freely. And against Sabalenka, who's the two-time defending champion, and who, much like Sinner, wears the crown of world number one and being the best player in the world very well. You know, she believes that this is who she is. You saw in her matches in the previous rounds how she came back even after a set down, where she believes that she's going to come back and win the match because ultimately she's the better player. And that's what I thought was happening, but Keys did not shrug. She did not shrink. The gauntlet was thrown in front of her, and with the momentum behind Sabalenka having won the second set, Keys stepped it up again, and she did the business. And this is what she did all tournament long. I mean, she beat Rybakina, a former Wimbledon champion. She beat Svitolina, who was as high as world number 3 once upon a time and has made it to a Grand Slam semi-final as recently as 2 years ago. And then she beat the world number 2 and 4-time Grand Slam champion Iga Swiatek in the semi-final. And then to do it, as I'm saying, against the world number 1, the best player on the tour, definitely the best player on the surface. A brilliant performance, and well deserved. And I have to clap also because she's a sister. Although she doesn't describe herself as this. This is me just like claiming her because she's got a black daddy, so she's one of us.
You know what it was for me, Jay, when I looked at Sabalenka's facial expressions and the loss of belief going away from her in the third set. It's almost like Dragon Ball Z. You know how, as it's scripted, as it's written, there'll always be a swing of momentum. One time Goku's winning it, and the other time Frieza's winning it. Then Frieza finds out that I've transformed and I've made all these changes to my game, and I still can't do it because I'm supposed to be the ruler of the universe. And then you come to realize that not in this lifetime, you know? Because for me, when she won the second set, I thought to myself, okay, things are back on track. Sabalenka's going to outpower. She's going to outmaneuver Madison Keys. It didn't happen. So shout out to Madison, man, because she brought the game to Sabalenka all the time. Never took a step back. Was there meeting her face to face and making sure she puts her own back. You know. So I think I was disappointed by Sabalenka because it's good to go on a run, Jay, especially when you've come close so often. That eventually, when you do convert, it feels so good, and you want to keep doing it over and over again, which is what's happened with the Djokovic's and the Nadals and the Federers of this era. Hence, Zverev can't get a sniff. But I think Madison Keys...
Look at Madison Keys being 29, having been born in the 90s. Out there, winning her first Grand Slam title.
Her first. You see, so this time for Zverev is
She's been injured. Those boys don't have those excuses.
Zverev,
she's been injured.
Madison before the final, and João Felix. Same. Probably disrespectful to say that. To the Australian Open champion, she converted. She looked good on the night. She looked good in the entire tournament as well. And kudos to her. She took the hardest route. She took the toughest gauntlets to get to the final. I think by the time she got to Sabalenka, she was war ready because she was battle hardened by all those ladies that she had to go through. And whether it's power, she matched her. Whether it was placement, she matched her. And it was just sheer mentality on the day because, as we said, games don't go to 5-5 and beyond. Not in the last 10 years of women's Grand Slam finals. So I think she was ready. Even if it went to tiebreak, I think Madison was ready. You know, so shout out to her.
And this was also a good opponent because traditionally Madison has struggled against counter punches. Your Kerbers, she has a bad record against Angelique Kerber, as well as the Romanian former number 1, whose name is not quite coming to me now. But against a someone who puts pace on the ball, it was maybe the perfect matchup for her. And congratulations to her. Chuck, closing it out, the big boxing announcements keep happening. And they've been happening for a while now. For a while now, they've been happening. And as another blockbuster that's been announced for September, you have Canelo Alvarez, who is... Why did Alvarez sound so weird when I said that? Because now I'm thinking about the football player. But Canelo Alvarez is scheduled to come up against Bud Crawford. You said to me, Chuck, that this might not happen. And actually not just you and other boxing fundies, because maybe it's too much of a gap to bridge for Crawford. But we're getting the matchup.
Mm.
What do you think? What's your reaction, first of all, and initial thoughts around that fight?
Oh, I'm happy to see it because the names. Let me first put that out. The names have me happy to see it because what I want to then say is that people are saying that Canelo's ducking Benavidez because that's who the guy who was in line for a shot was, Benavidez, and he's the guy in the same weight class, and they're going to put together a blockbuster in terms of the guys who are left at middleweight or at cruiserweight, if I'm not mistaken. So because it's not him and it's going to someone who is smaller, and we previously heard Canelo say, I don't want to fight Crawford because as good as you guys say he's small, and when I beat him, it'll be a hollow victory because he's too small a guy. And so I don't want to do that because it adds nothing to my legacy. The fact that the fight is actually happening is quite intriguing, to be honest. But we saw Bud Spencer against Matrimov.
Bud Spencer, Chuck, is not a boxer.
Bud Crawford. Sorry. Bud Spencer.
Bud Spencer is somebody totally different. He used to fight. And he also came out ass whoopings, but he looked a little different from Crawford.
It was like a level above Steven Seagal in terms of the realms of unbelievability, in terms of how well he could fight and how many people he was putting away. But ever since Crawford fought Spence, I mixed those two up. Let me just say Crawford. Crawford, I think, Jay, it's a big leap, man. It's not quite Islam Makhachev and Trikas in terms of it's a big gap in terms of the powers. There's a lot. But Canelo's gone all the way to Bivol. And got I mean, he wasn't knocked out. He was just beaten by a better boxer. That's he could hang. He could hang. I think it might be a similar story when Crawford goes to Spence. I hope I'm wrong because he's got the tool to make it a very interesting fight. Because technically he's probably edges Canelo in terms of technicality and what he can do in terms of reading in the fight. But it's just a power game, Jay, at this point. Because if Canelo can snug it out with Triple G, I don't know. So first reactions that I'm excited, but very curious in terms of how it actually plays out.
Yeah, Chuck, I just want to see like guys fighting, right? That's what I was saying. Like boxing is everybody's favorite sport. Just don't know it because the thought experiment is if you're at a four-way crossing and there are different sports being played at each corner. There's football over here, there's cricket over there, there's rugby over here, whatever other sports. And then there are people who are fighting. Everyone is going to crowd around the fight. Like, everyone wants to see that. Like, right here at home, it's like, scooter. We know what time it is. Like, you form the ring, and they're throwing down in the middle of that. So, when you do get into the sport itself, and you become familiar with the personalities, this is exciting, and it's exciting, and it continues to be exciting. Maybe in a few years' time, familiarity will breed contempt to, okay, now we're getting all the big fights. But for the longest time in boxing, we haven't been getting these fights, right? And this is not a fight we really anticipated because this is not a mandatory defense or guys who are in the same weight division, a la a Mayweather and Pacquiao, who just have not been wanting to fight for the longest time and ducking one another. This is a dream, like the powers that be just said, have this. And it's like, well, yes, like I'll gladly accept it. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the spectacle. Like as you say, like Crawford versus like Canelo. Big names, the biggest names out there, guys who have different times been number one in terms of pound for pound best boxers in the world, and they're going to be in the same ring together. And this is not some guy who is 40 years old and another one who is like 28, and it's like, what's it going to look like? Or both of them, for that matter, being past their prime, still very much there. And I think where Crawford is concerned, because of how we're clamoring for that fight against Spence and how badly it went for Spence, like, it's an absolute different level. And you look around where Crawford is concerned, there's not really anybody, and the name Canelo was thrown out there. It felt like, because as a fantasy, it's like, yeah, Canelo, it's like, well, if you could match up any two great fighters in history, who would it be? It's like, I'd love to see this guy fight this guy. But that's the reason we've got pound for pound rankings, because those fights are not really going to happen because the disparity is too large. And ultimately, however good you are technically, as you said in a previous episode, sometimes power just like it eliminates all of that. The other guy is just bigger, he's just stronger, and it doesn't matter how well you move your head or your feet or how good your game plan is. Like, you're just going to get caught once or multiple times, and you're just not going to be able to hang with that. But the fight is happening. I'm absolutely looking forward to it. I'm gonna be backing Crawford in this one. I'll say that to begin with.
The sisters and the brothers.
To the sisters and the brothers, Chuck. We gotta stick together, man. We gotta stick together. And although looking forward to what hopefully is going to be a great fight. Kudos to the people who made it happen and to both camps. Right, we've come to the end of this episode. We'll be talking more Crawford and Alvarez as we move closer to September. There's still time, so Crawford has time to bulk up and whatever else he needs to do. And in the meantime, we'll continue to bring you the best in sports. If you are not yet subscribed to the podcast, please do so. Please like the content that we share, comment. We love talking to you. We love hearing from you. And if you want to continue that conversation, you can do so on all social media platforms. We're at 2 Upfront Pod. I'm at J_Mzulu. Chuck is at Chuck2Up. Also, whenever you come across the content, please share it far and wide. We appreciate the love. We appreciate the interaction. Please continue doing so. From myself, Jay, I'm outie.
There's contention between who's the biggest institute in South Africa. Is it Pirates? Is it Chiefs? There's contention in terms of who's the better talent. Is it Senna? Is it Alvarez? When it comes to fighting, it surely is Bud Spence.